That's what I'm going to be talking about today is abandoned. And I've got to get situated. I'm sorry. You know, that song, it talks about being. My first question I'm going to ask, are you abandoned from this world? Or are you abandoned from the kingdom of God? It's one or two choices. When Brian asked me to preach, he said, man, they really liked you up there. I said, well, I guess I didn't step on enough toes. So, but it is great to be back. And I know a lot of you. And if I don't know you, we know a lot of the same people. But I don't have my choir with me this time. They're having an Angus sale. And so they're preparing for that. But I want to get started. You know, I told you last time, I love to hunt. So you'll probably think I'm going to talk about fishing this time. Nope, I ain't even going to talk about hunting. May 27th, 1983. Can anybody tell me what happened that day? Nobody? There was a young man from Fort Cobb. Him and three friends, went to Anadarko. You got it, Melissa. Went to Anadarko to pick up another friend. They was headed to Lawton to go to the movies. Right outside of Anadarko, right before you get to the church camp now, drunk driver came around the curve, hit my brother broadside, killed him instantly. Went from a broken nose all the way to my brother's death. A little bit about my brother. Donnie was fixing to be 21 years old. He worked at Max Quick Stop, the shutdown Quick Stop on the north end of Fort Cobb. He didn't make much money, but whatever he had, he gave it away. He went without electricity just so where the older ladies in the community would have their medicine for the month. Had transit coming, homeless people coming through during the oil boom. Donnie's door was always unlocked. They'd come in, beg for something to drink, eat. Donnie would feed them, give them something to drink, tell them, go to my house. Didn't even know who he was. And I found a lot of this out afterwards. But the young man that took Donnie's life, he felt abandoned. This is a two-part story because now we're going to get into this message and I'm going to finish this story kind of toward the end. But I'm going to read from three passages of scriptures. If you would, turn to Mark 14, 43 through 49. It says, and Jesus immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and scribes and the elders. Now his betrayer had given them the signal, saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him and lead him away safely. As soon as he had come, immediately he went up to him and he said to him, Rabbi, Rabbi, and kissed him. Then they laid their hands on him and took him. And one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus answered and said to them, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then they all forsook him and fled. We're talking about Judas. Judas sold Jesus out. I'm going to ask a question. Has anybody really done a study on Judas? Judas is kind of an interesting person. Did you know that Judas was the treasurer for the disciples? Have you noticed every time Judas is listed with the other 11 disciples, he's always toward the bottom? How many of y'all know what the 30 pieces of silver represented? Back in Exodus, this is the first time it was mentioned. This is the value that the priest put on Jesus' life. It said if the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to the master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. To the priest, Jesus' life was nothing more than a slave. Did y'all know that? And I done a study, and it was very, very interesting. Judas, he was more worried about his worldly possessions than his eternal possessions. That 30 pieces of silver, I'm going to kind of do it in today's time. An ounce of silver is roughly $80. 80 times 30, $2,400. That's what he sold Jesus out for. Today's time, $2,400. Never thought of it that way until I really started doing a study on Judas. Wouldn't you think that somebody's life is worth more than $2,400? If you're going to turn them over for him to be killed, there's rewards out there. Well, last one I seen, what was it, 10,000, 50,000, something like that. They've got $1 million rewards for some of these terrorists. Jesus was only worth $2,400 today's time. That's not even a month's wage. But that's how they valued him. Have you noticed that Judas never called Jesus teacher, or he called him teacher, rabbi, never called him Lord, never called him Savior, never referred to him in a higher authority than than a teacher. Judas, he did feel a little bit remorsed. He took that money back and he threw it at the priest. But you know, the priest would not accept that money back. Blood money, that's right. Judas went out and hung himself. Do you know what the priest done with the blood money? Bought the field that Judas hung himself in. It's called a potter's field. I just found that interesting. You know, and that's what I've been trying to do. Study up on the disciples. Study up on different people in the Bible. Judas abandoned God. $2,400. And maybe some people think Judas was doing it for political power, that Jesus was going to help overthrow the Roman government, that his stature being with Jesus is going to elevate his stature within the community. With that being said, are you selling Jesus out? $2,400, would you sell Jesus out? I'm going to go on down a little bit further in Mark. Mark 14, 66 through 72. Now, as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of high priest came. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, "You were with Jesus of Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what you are saying." And he went out on the porch and a rooster crowed. And a servant girl saw him again and began to say to those who stood by, "This is one of them." But he denied it again. And a little later, and a little later, those who stood by said to Peter again, "Surely you are one of them, for you are Galilean, and your speech shows it." Then he began to curse and swear, "I do not know this man of whom you speak." A second time the rooster crowed. Then Peter called to mind the word that Jesus had said to him, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And when he thought about it, he wept. There's a difference between Judas and a little bit of a difference between Peter. Judas knew Jesus, but Judas did not know Jesus. Judas was a little remorseful for what he'd done. Peter knew instantly the sin that he committed. And I said it that way to show the remorsefulness that Peter had. Peter knew that what he'd done was wrong. Now, Jesus predicted both of these things to happen. And I'm going to back up for just a second. In verse 50, when Judas betrayed him, did y'all catch what the disciples did? Everybody did. They forgot him and fled. They abandoned Jesus. All these things had to happen for Jesus to die on the cross. But still, you think walking every day, listening to Jesus' teaching, seeing the miracles that he performed, watching him raise Lazarus from the dead, watching him rub mud on somebody's eyes, healing the blind. All of these things, $2,400 sold him out. Back then, I don't know how much the shekels was worth. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Knowing what I know now, I couldn't do it. As Peter realized after that rooster crowed that second time, I really feel Peter dropped to his knees and with them tears flowing down his face and asked for forgiveness. Judas, he threw the coins, he ran out, and he hung himself. Now I'm going to read from Mark 15, 6 through 14. Now at the feast, he was accustomed to releasing one prisoner to them, whoever they requested. And there was one named Barabbas, who was chained with his fellow rebels. They had committed murder and rebellion. Then the multitude, crying aloud, began to ask him to do just as he had always done for them. But Pilate answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release to you the King of Jews?" For he knew that the chief priests had handed him over because of envy. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd so that they would rather release Barabbas to them. Pilate answered and said to them again, What then do you want me to do with him, whom you call the King of Jews?" So they cried out again, "Crucify him." Then Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, "Crucify him." The same crowds that welcomed Jesus a week before, shouting, "Hosanna," palm leaves laying down Jesus' path, are the same ones that just abandoned him, yelling, "Crucify him. Kill him. Do away with him." Abandon him. Barabbas, I tried to pull up some history on him. All I could find was he rioted. Him and his buddies, they killed some people during protest. And I was hoping I could find some more information on him just to kind of get a background of him. But all I know, and I told Brian I was going to say this, and I'll explain it in just a sec. If you look at it, you got Jesus on one side and you got Barabbas on the other. Jesus, they selected Jesus to die instead of Barabbas. Look at the way that Jesus stepped in and died for Barabbas. I told Brian I was going to say Barabbas was the first one that Jesus died for. He said, "Well, now, hold on just a second." I said, "No." I said, "You let me explain myself." I said, "Jesus died for all of us." Barabbas, Jesus took his spot, just like he did with all of us. He said, "Well, yeah, you've got a good point there." But what I'm saying is, Jesus, we all represented Barabbas. We all should have been right there where Barabbas is or was. But Jesus stepped in and took our place. Jesus does not want to see anybody go to hell. That's why he came and done what he did. He lived a perfect life. You know, I just kind of imagine what the scene was like. You have all of these people, like I said, a week before, watch Jesus make that triumphant entry. They're the ones that are yelling, "Crucify him." I can see Mary and maybe James and John, a few of the other disciples, kind of hiding in the back because they did not want to be put in the same position Jesus was in. They didn't want to be killed. But Jesus, he knew that that's what he was supposed to do. Jesus knew that is the only way for us to have an eternal relationship with him. And I'm so grateful that he done that. Kind of talked about abandon. Yeah, it did pull up good. I looked up the definition of abandon. Having been deserted or cast off, unrestrained, uninhibited. Cease to support or look after. Give up completely. Them was just a couple of them. Here we see the world abandon Jesus. My question to you, are you abandoned from this world? Are you living the life that Jesus would want you to live, separated from this world? There's no in between. There's no straddling the fence. I'm going to go back to the rest of that story. We went to court. I was only 13, 14 years old. And we went to court. One of the many times I got to skip school. We was in the courtroom and I could see his name was Eddie Monks. He was sitting over there at the table, defendant table, had a couple of guards around him, and all I could think of is how can I get to him? I later found out that my oldest brother found out where Eddie was after the crash. He was at the Anadarko Hospital. Larry went into the hospital. He went into the room. Nothing happened, but my brother spoke his piece. And if you know my brother, that's a miracle within itself. Eddie, he sat there. No remorseful look on his face. Had one look. And all I could see was the red from the anger in my eyes toward him. The hate I had toward him. He was found guilty, sentenced to 15 years. Judge got up. He walked out. The deputies got him, and if you know in Caddo County Courthouse, they got the elevator right there. We all stood up and we walked outside. Here comes the deputies leading him by the family. And all I could think of is, how can I get a hold of him? You killed my brother, I want to kill you. They go to the elevator and they push the button. And as they're waiting for that button, or for the elevator to come up and the doors to open, my mom, big woman, about that tall, she had some tracts. I don't remember if she had a Bible or not, but knowing my mom, she did. She walked up to Eddie Monks. And she asked the guard, she said, "Can I speak to him?" The guard said, "Yeah." Or the deputies. My mom looked him square in the eye. She said, "I forgive you. I love you, and I forgive you." I couldn't do that. I told my mom, I said, "How dare you do that?" She said, "Johnny," she said, "as Christians, that's what we're supposed to do." Donnie's time on earth was done. God called him home. Eddie didn't kill him. God took him. It took me a lot of years to forgive him. And I have. I would love to see him. Hug his neck, tell him, "I forgive you for what you've done." Fast forward a few years from when he got sent off, he got let out. Within the first week, he got picked up again for DUI, leaving the scene of an accident. I'm going, still at that time, I still had a lot of hate in my heart. I would have loved to seen him. He hasn't learned his lesson. But I was talking to a gentleman here in Grace Month that works up at Half Moon Circle. We got talking about my brother and Eddie Monks. He said, he said, the funny thing happened. He said, Eddie went to prison for a 15-year sentence. I think he served 12 or 13 years of that sentence. He said, and then he got picked up for the DUI and leaving the scene of damaged property. He said, something clicked. He said, Eddie, as soon as he got out of jail, uprooted from Anadarko, Oklahoma. He said he's now, I believe it's in New York. He is a regular attendant of a church there. He is a teacher of a class. I'm going, this ain't the same dude I knew that I wanted to hurt. Sometimes it takes things to happen for God to get our attention. But I tell you that story because I think it just fit in with the way that Eddie Monks was feeling at that time that he stood at the elevator. Abandoned. His family abandoned him. He didn't have no support at court. The Gorman family hated him. Wanted to hurt him. The deputies, they was doing their job. They had him handcuffed. They didn't care if they put him on a little too tight or twisted his arm just a little bit. Abandoned. But you know, when Jesus gets a hold of you, Jesus can make a big difference in what you do. I'm very thankful that when I ask for forgiveness, God don't go, well, you remember back in 1983, all that hate you had in your heart? Why should I forgive you? I'm so thankful that my God, all I got to do is ask. Can you imagine Jesus standing there, never saying a word? Soon as they released Barabbas, they led Jesus down. Jesus already been beaten. Blood. Crown of thorns on his head. All the pictures, they showed Jesus hanging on that cross with a loincloth with not much blood on him. I'm here to tell you, them pictures are wrong. They stripped Jesus naked. They beat the tire out of him. He was bloody. I would say almost to the unrecognizable state. You know, the cattails that the guards used when they beat him, they had leads that came off of them whips. And in them leads, they sewn or weaved, braided, however they done it. Stone, glass, anything sharp that when it struck you, it didn't just whip you. It dug in and it yanked it out. My Jesus done that for us. They sat there and they pulled his beard out. They spit at him. I was thinking, back when I worked at the grocery store, I worked with a man. We caught a shoplifter. We took him back into our little office, and the office was maybe 6 foot wide. Had the desk and a chair, and then you had a filing cabinet here and then a box, usually a paper towel box or something like that we threw trash in. But we'd take the shoplifters in there and we'd call the cops. Well, we caught one, and this guy, he was standing in the doorway. We was blocking it. I just clocked in. The shoplifter, he stood up, and he looked this guy right in the face, and he just hawked one, and he spit it right in his face. This old boy, he casually took off his glasses. He cleaned it. He put his glasses back on, and you just seen his fist double up. He just reared back and knocked him into that trash can. That's what I would have done. You spit in my face, it's on. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I have no control of that. But Jesus took everything, never said a word. When they beat him with the whips, tied his hands around or onto this stump, rock, whatever it is. 39 lashes. 40 would have killed you. They picked him up, put the crown of thorns on him. They didn't gently place it. Thorns, 2.5, 3 inches long. They drilled it in. They put that purple robe on him to mock his royalty. They sucker punched him. Then they led him naked up that hill, full of blood, to carry his own cross so we could have eternal life. That song that we just played, I love that song. Abandoned. I want to be abandoned from this world. I want to live my life, and it is a struggle every single day. I want to live my life for Jesus. Whatever Jesus asked me to do, I don't care what this world asks or thinks. I want to strive to do what Jesus asked of me. That's the way as Christians we should be. We should want to be abandoned from this world. How's your relationship? Are you ready to abandon this world for Jesus that went through everything just so where you could have eternal life? It wasn't a pretty scene, but it was one that had to happen. Right before Jesus took his last breath, he yelled, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Psalms 22. A lot of people think that God left him. This is a poem David wrote. Jesus was reciting it. Psalms 22. My God, why have you forsaken me?" I didn't tell David I was going to read a little more, but I'm going to read a few more verses of this. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me? And from the words of my groaning. Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear. And in the night seasons, and am not silent. But you are holy, enthroned in the praises of Israel. Our fathers trusted in you. They trusted, and you delivered them. They have cried to you and were delivered. They trusted in you and were not ashamed. God didn't forsake him. God didn't abandon him. God couldn't look at the sin. But God never abandoned Jesus. Are you willing to abandon this world for Jesus? I know I keep asking this question over and over. But until we get our lives right, the people outside these walls, their lives won't change. You know, I'm so proud. I'm sorry. It's between all the pollen and me burning last night. I said this last time, and I'm so proud of my wife. When we got married, she was Catholic. Have you ever been in a Baptist-Catholic relationship? She would ask me questions, I would ask her questions, and I'm not trying to embarrass her by any means. But she chose late last year to be a follower of Christ. And I'm so proud of her. I just want to ask again, are you willing to be abandoned by this world? Or are you more worried about your earthly possessions? I don't know what your relationship with Christ is, but I'm going to tell you, if it's not where it needs to be, today is the day. Today is the time that we need to reconcile with God. If you don't know him, I'd love to introduce you to him. And I'm just so thankful, like I said earlier, that Jesus don't hold a grudge and Jesus don't remember the past. I'm going to ask our deacons to come up, if y'all would. Sometimes I feel like it's better to talk to somebody they know. And while they're coming up, are you willing to step out and make a change? Whether you come to talk to any of them, or if you just need to come up and kneel down and pray. Don't worry about what this world has. Look what Jesus has done for you. Jesus had the courage to take the beatings for us. David?